Gasper, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I'll just say I don't think either side comes out looking good in this one. And I've said this for a while now about Rafael Devers. He's not a face of the franchise guy. He's not a leader. He's not a winner. He's not a loser, but he's just not a winning player. He's not a winner. He's just a hitter. And that's really what he is. And that's what they invested in. And that's the prior regime. And I will go to my grave believing the only reason they gave him that money was because the analytical actuarial tables said it made sense because he was like 26 and because he was the last guy left. And they knew they'd have a fan revolt after not re-signing Betts and Bogarts. But all that being said, I put this more on Craig Breslow than I do on Devers. And I don't care if I'm in the minority on that. I just look at this and think that a guy like Devers and maybe some other guys in that clubhouse, if they're paying attention, they can smell that no matter what baseball operations is saying and the team is saying, they are still more invested in the next great Red Sox team and these prospects and building them up than winning right now. Because if that weren't true, then you would put Christian Campbell at first base. You would put Roman Anthony, who's basically blocked defensively up here at first base. I mean, look, I know they want to work on him in the outfield, but you tell me which of the three outfielders, Mazz, that they play right now, is he a better defensive outfielder than?
I'm not sure he's better than any of them.
Yeah, I agree. And oh, by the way, Rafaela
defensively,
Rafaela can be a utility guy, but it was Breslow who gave him an 8-year, $50 million extension last April. Is that what you do to a utility guy? So I feel like they put a do not disturb sign on Campbell and Anthony in terms of first base, but you're going to ask Devers, who's actually accomplished stuff in the majors, to move, and you didn't have him take any balls at first base during spring training. Why? Because you were worried about disturbing or spooking Tristan Casas, who's had one good half of baseball in his career. They're still way more invested in the prospects and the prospects panning out and them being able to point to that and the young players than they are in winning. And that's where I side with Rafi Devers on this. Like, okay, you want to come and ask me to do it. Well, why aren't you asking Campbell to do it? Why aren't you asking Roman Anthony to do it? Because that would be the best version of the team, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, Chris, that answer, too, is rooted in, I want to win the argument instead of doing what's best for the team. So it then becomes, well, why don't you ask someone else? I hate that sort of mentality when it comes to this sort. And I understand what you're saying. But to me, it's, do you want to win games or not? We're asking you, do you want to do it? Now, your point about them having the future in mind more than the present, true, 100%. And they try to hide it now because they went out and they traded for Crochet and they signed Bregman, Aroldis Chapman, if you want to count him, but whatever, there's a one-year deal. But they try to hide it, and the fact of the matter is they should have had Roman Anthony working out at first base a month ago. Okay, they should have had him doing it then because it was the logical place for him to fit in if and when the time came. Casas was struggling, and they wanted to move Casas anyway. So that was the place to do it, but they don't want to do it, fine. Campbell's another easy one. Chris is right about that. They should want to do that. They're just more, no, we can't mess with the kids.
Chris, that's the whole point. We can't mess with the kids. Well, what are you more invested in, winning or like messing with the kids? And by the way, both Campbell and Anthony are superior athletes to Devers. It's going to mess. Campbell has no defensive position, right? I mean, he's okay at second. He can play center, but he's not better than Rafaela. He has no defensive position. And Anthony, if he's half the athlete that the Red Sox think he is, he's going to get messed up playing first base. This is the part I don't get. Like, these people are smarter than I am in Red Sox baseball operations. They all have Ivy League degrees. I do not. There's been a lot of advancements in analytics and analysis in baseball over the last 20 years. But all I know is for the 100 years prior to that, you could stick any stiff at first base. How hard is it to play first base? Mazz, I know you remember this. Carlos Quintana played first base. My mom, who's not even a sports fan, would be like, how is that guy a professional athlete? He looks like he has a load in his pants.
Yeah, someone
and he
reminded
could play
me.
First base.
I forgot. Hanley Ramirez played first base. Do you remember when that?
Yeah,
Hanley Ramirez.
Yeah, he was half decent at it, too. Yeah, listen, and I say half decent. It wasn't a Gold Glover, but he wasn't a complete train wreck. And so
and that guy was on Planet Zippy.
Yes, completely.
If you're a legit major league player, you should be able to play first base, Mazz.
Yes. Now, look, I happen to think that good defense at first base is valuable. You can take away a lot of errors there. So I don't want to just put some beanbag over there and stick a glove in his hand, and and then he can't pick a ball out of the dirt. Like, I don't want that either. I want somebody over there who's functional. But Campbell and Anthony should both be functional or even beyond it. So, they're dinking around. And, Chris, when you say he's got a Yale degree, that's part of the problem. Okay? So, the whole problem with these guys is they turn everything into something bigger than it is, and you got to think of it all from, multiple angles. Just put someone over there who can handle the position and makes your lineup better. It's not that complicated.
Chris, how about the piece of Cord didn't want to ask him, Breslow had to ask him, Devers is sort of at Breslow's throat. It feels like he's calling him the GM, not even calling him by name. I assume he's good with Cora, that whole piece to it.
Yeah, I mean, that piece is sort of interesting, and I think it goes back to what I said before, just looking at it and trying to extrapolate from the outside is, again, it feels like they're still, even though they changed who is leading baseball operations, it doesn't necessarily feel like they've changed the operating philosophy. They're still really dogmatic about the future. And so you end up with that divide, right, between the people in uniform, which would include Cora as the manager, the people in uniform in the clubhouse, and the people in baseball operations. And it feels like that still exists. And I thought it was interesting. There was a tweet, Zach Scott, the former assistant general manager for the Red Sox and former interim GM for the Mets, he tweets some interesting stuff. And he was saying basically that the Red Sox botched this by not having Devers take ground balls during spring training, which he didn't say these words, but I'm looking at it and saying, I think he's hinting at the fact they didn't want to do that to upset Casas. And so they botched this thing. And also he said with Red Sox ownership that they're too focused on IQ, not EQ, and EQ is basically emotional intelligence. In other words, they have these guys that are wildly intelligent, but they can't connect with the players. They can't communicate with the player. That was what made Theo so special, is that, here's a guy with a Yale degree, as smart as anybody, but he could, and Mazz knows this better than I do, but he could go down there and talk to those guys on their level in the clubhouse and crush a beer with them. And they felt like maybe they didn't always like him, but they didn't feel like it was some nerd from on high dictating their life all the time. And I think it's interesting that Zach Scott is sort of saying, like, hey, there's a people skills element to this job that goes beyond the analytics that the Red Sox are failing at right now.